The mysterious stranger. The bar was almost empty. Dim lights flickered, casting long shadows on the wooden floor. A dusty old fan turned slowly on the ceiling, making a low creaking sound. The air smelled of cheap alcohol and old leather. Joran pushed open the heavy door, stepping inside. He was tired. His boots were covered in dust from walking for hours. His black jacket was torn at the edges. He just wanted one drink before he moved on. The bartender, an old man with gray hair, looked up and frowned. "You shouldn't be here, traveler," he said in a low voice. Joran ignored him and walked to the counter. He dropped a few credits on the table. "Whiskey," he said. The bartender sighed but poured the drink. Joran picked up the glass and took a slow sip. The burn in his throat felt good. It reminded him he was still alive. Then he felt it, someone watching him. From the dark corner of the bar, a man sat alone. His face was partly hidden under a hood. He was not drinking, not eating, just watching. Joran tensed. He had been running for too long. He knew when something was wrong. "Who's that?" he asked the bartender, keeping his voice low. The old man shook his head. "No one you want to meet." Joran turned slightly, pretending not to care, but his eyes focused on the stranger. The man didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. Joran took another sip of his drink. He had been running from danger for years. He had enemies in every corner of the galaxy. Was this one of them? The stranger suddenly stood up. His movements were slow, careful, like he didn't want to scare anyone. He walked toward Joran's table. Joran's hand went to his side, where he kept a small knife hidden. The man sat across from him, uninvited. He placed a small metal device on the table between them. It was smooth, silver, and had a small red light blinking on top. "You don't know me," the stranger said, his voice calm but firm. "But I know you, Joran." Joran's heart pounded. He had never told anyone his real name in this town. He narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The stranger smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Someone who knows the truth about you." Joran glanced at the device. Was it a bomb? A tracker? He forced himself to stay calm. "I think you've got the wrong person," he said. The man chuckled softly. "No, I don't." He leaned forward slightly. "You've been running for a long time, haven't you? Trying to escape something. But no matter where you go, the past follows." Joran clenched his fists under the table. He didn't like this. The bartender sighed loudly. "Don't listen to him," he muttered. "He's bad news." The stranger ignored him. His eyes stayed on Joran. "Do you want to know the truth?" he asked. "Or will you keep running forever?" Joran's grip tightened on his knife. He didn't trust this man. But the way he spoke, the confidence in his voice, it made Joran feel uneasy. He didn't answer. The stranger tapped the metal device. "This has the answers you're looking for," he said. Joran's mouth went dry. He had spent years trying to forget his past. He had buried his old life, changed his name, and disappeared. But something inside him, something deep, whispered, "What if he's telling the truth?" The stranger leaned back. "One drink," he said. "One drink, and I'll tell you everything." Joran hesitated. His instincts screamed at him to leave, but his curiosity was stronger. He lifted his glass and took a slow sip. The stranger smiled. "Good choice," he said. Then he slid the device closer. "Now let me tell you who you really are." A deal with the unknown. Joran felt the weight of the words settle in his chest. "Now let me tell you who you really are." The bar was silent, except for the low hum of the old fan and the faint crackling of a neon sign outside. The stranger's fingers rested lightly on the metal device, its red light blinking steadily, like a heartbeat. Joran glanced at the bartender. The old man shook his head slowly, eyes filled with quiet warning. "Don't do this," the bartender muttered. "Once you hear it, you can't unhear it." Joran ignored him. His fingers traced the rim of his glass, mind racing. He had spent years erasing his past, but now, just like that, it was being placed in front of him, wrapped in mystery. He looked back at the stranger. "You say you know me," he said, keeping his voice level. "But I don't know you, so why should I listen?" The stranger smirked. "Because I know what you're running from, and I know it's catching up to you." Joran's grip on his drink tightened. The man continued, his voice calm. "Certain, you're looking over your shoulder. Every night, every planet, every dark alley. You tell yourself it's paranoia, but deep down, you know better." Joran's jaw clenched. The stranger leaned forward. "What if I told you, you're not just running from them?" He tapped the device again. "You're running from yourself." Joran stared at the device, at its blinking red light. A warning? A secret? A trap? He forced a smirk. "That's a nice story," he said. "But stories are cheap." The stranger's expression didn't change. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver coin. He spun it on the table between them. The metal glowed faintly in the dim light. Joran froze. The coin was not from this world. It was from them. A symbol was engraved on its surface, sharp geometric lines forming an insignia he thought he had buried in his past. Memories threatened to surface, but Joran shoved them down. "You recognize it," the stranger said. It wasn't a question. Joran didn't answer. The bartender cursed under his breath. "Get out," he growled at the stranger. "Take your damn coin and leave." The stranger ignored him. His cold eyes stayed locked on Joran. "This is your last chance," he said. "One last drink, one last truth. After that you decide, keep running or face what's coming." Joran's pulse pounded. The door creaked open. A gust of cold air swept inside. A new presence entered the bar. Boots clicked against the wooden floor, slow and heavy. Joran didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He knew they had found him. The stranger smiled. "Well," he said, his fingers tapping the coin. "Looks like you don't have much time to decide." Joran's breath came slow and steady. His knife was still hidden at his side. His muscles tensed, ready for a fight. Then, with deliberate calm, he lifted his drink, took a sip, and placed the glass back down. The stranger nodded. "Good choice." The red light on the device stopped blinking. The truth was coming. And so was the storm. The forgotten identity. Joran's breath was slow, controlled, but inside, he was unraveling. The red light on the device stopped blinking. The stranger's fingers hovered over it for a second, then pressed a hidden switch. A soft click. The device whirred to life, casting a faint blue glow on the table between them. Joran's heartbeat drummed in his ears. The bar around him seemed to fade away. The bartender, the dim lights, the cold drink in his hand, none of it mattered anymore. Because the voice that echoed from the device was his own. "This is Commander Joran Vex, initiating final protocol. All targets eliminated." Joran's stomach twisted. His own voice, clear and sharp, spoken with the confidence of a man he didn't remember being. He shot a glare at the stranger. "What is this?" The man's expression remained unreadable. "The truth." The recording continued. "Mission success. No survivors. Project Revenant moving to Phase 3. Joran stood so fast his chair nearly toppled over. His pulse pounded against his skull. "Turn it off." The stranger obeyed, pressing the device again. The voice disappeared. The bar was silent. Joran clenched his fists. "That's not me." The stranger tilted his head. "Isn't it?" Joran shook his head violently. "No. I never." His words caught in his throat. He wanted to deny it, to say it was fake, a trick. But deep inside, something cracked. Memories, faint and fragmented, stirred like ghosts in his mind. Gunfire, smoke, a battlefield soaked in blood, a mission, an order. And his own voice, cold and detached, repeating those same words. Final protocol. No survivors. Joran stumbled back a step, gripping the edge of the table. His breath came in ragged gasps. The bartender was watching, sorrow in his tired eyes. He had seen men break before. Joran felt like he was suffocating. His past, his real past, was clawing its way back to him, dragging him into the dark. "You lied to me," he growled at the stranger. The man shook his head. "No, they did." Joran's vision blurred with fury. "Who are you?" The stranger leaned forward, voice softer now. "Someone just like you." Joran stared at him. "What do you mean?" The stranger slowly pulled back his sleeve, revealing something on his forearm. A brand. A mark. Joran felt the blood drain from his face. He had the same mark. A perfect geometric symbol, burned into his skin long ago. Something he had always assumed was a wound from his past life. But now he knew better. "You weren't born, Joran," the stranger said quietly. "You were made." A heavy silence settled between them. The bar door creaked again. Joran's instincts screamed at him, "Danger." The stranger exhaled. "And now, they're here to take you back." Joran turned, hand reaching for his knife. A group of armored figures stood at the entrance, their faces hidden behind dark helmets, their weapons gleaming under the dim light. The one in front stepped forward, voice distorted through a mechanical filter. "Subjects 6 to 17. Stand down." Joran's blood ran cold. That was not his name. It was his designation, and the people who gave it to him had finally found him. The hunter and the hunted. The silence inside the bar was deadly. Joran stood frozen, fingers twitching near his knife. The men at the door weren't ordinary soldiers. Their armor was smooth, dark, and featureless, like shadows wrapped in steel. But Joran didn't need to see their faces. He knew who they were. They were his past. The lead soldier took another step forward, his voice crackling through his helmet speaker. "Subject 6 to 17. Stand down." Joran's gut twisted. That name, that number, felt like a chain tightening around his throat. Behind him, the stranger exhaled, slow and calm. "They won't ask twice," the stranger muttered. Joran's pulse hammered against his ribs. His body screamed at him to run, but his feet stayed planted. The bartender sighed heavily, stepping back, hands raised. "I don't want trouble in my bar." The lead soldier ignored him. His weapon, sleek and unfamiliar, hummed as he raised it. "Come quietly, or we will retrieve you by force." Joran's mind raced. He had no memory of who these people were, of what they had done to him. But his instincts knew one thing. They would never let him leave alive. Joran squared his jaw. "I don't take orders." A beat of silence. Then the soldier lifted his gun. Engaging target. Joran moved before the words even registered. A shot cracked through the air, a bolt of searing red light, but he was already diving. His body reacted on its own, muscle memory he didn't remember having. The blast sizzled past his head, scorching the counter behind him. Glass shattered. The bartender cursed. Joran hit the ground hard, rolling behind a table. The stranger was already moving, flipping the metal device into his pocket. Another shot. Another near miss. Joran grabbed his knife, but his instincts screamed. This was wrong. These soldiers weren't just here to kill him. They wanted him alive. The stranger ducked behind a chair, eyes locked on Joran. "They're testing you," he said. "They want to see if you still have it." Joran's teeth clenched. "If I still have what?" A third shot rang out, aimed at his legs. A capture shot. Joran spun sideways, barely dodging. The bartender, now crouched behind the counter, shouted, "If you two don't handle this, I swear I'm throwing you out." Joran growled. He had two choices. Run, keep running, just like he always had. Fight, and finally face the truth of what he was. The stranger made the choice for him. A small round device rolled across the floor. A flash grenade. Boom. Light exploded through the bar. The soldiers staggered back, momentarily blinded. The stranger grabbed Joran's arm. Up. Now. Joran didn't hesitate. He was already moving, leaping over the bar counter just as bullets tore through the walls. Back door. Joran shouted over the gunfire. The bartender pointed without looking. Take it, and don't come back. Joran sprinted, the stranger right behind him. More shots. Sparks flew as metal walls exploded around them. Joran burst through the back door into the cold, empty night. His boots skidded against the wet alley pavement. He turned, ready to fight, ready to do something. But the stranger shoved him forward. Move. Joran's muscles burned as they ran. Shadows shifted in the alleys around them. More soldiers. Joran's breath came fast and ragged. Who are these people? The stranger barely spared him a glance. The ones who made you. Joran gritted his teeth. And who the hell are you? The stranger smirked. The one trying to keep you alive. Ahead, a neon-lit street stretched into the distance. Crowds, speeders, an open city. Joran could lose himself in it, disappear. But something inside him whispered, you can't run forever. He clenched his fists. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The unfinished mission. Joran's lungs burned as he sprinted through the neon-lit streets. The air was thick with the scent of rain and engine fumes. Speeders zipped overhead, their lights flashing like streaks of lightning in the night. Behind him, the city roared with life. Blaring sirens, distant chatter, and the heavy boots of the soldiers hunting him. The stranger ran beside him, moving effortlessly, like he had done this 100 times before. Keep moving, the man ordered. Joran didn't need the reminder. He stole a quick glance over his shoulder. The black-armored soldiers weren't far behind, weaving through the crowd with mechanical precision. Silent. Fast. Relentless. Joran's gut twisted. They weren't just chasing him. They were guiding him. Pushing him somewhere. He didn't know how, but he felt it, like some forgotten instinct kicking in. The stranger seemed to sense it too. They're not trying to kill you, he said, breathing hard. Not yet. Joran narrowed his eyes. Then what do they want? The stranger didn't answer. Instead, he yanked Joran into a narrow alleyway, pressing him hard against the cold metal wall. Listen to me, the stranger whispered. You can't run forever. Joran's pulse pounded. I don't even know what I'm running from. The stranger smirked. Then let's change that. He placed his palm on Joran's chest. And in an instant, everything shifted. A surge of forgotten power. Joran's vision blurred. The alley, the city, the noise. It all melted away. Flashes of something else. Asterisk, asterisk, another place, another time. Asterisk, asterisk flooded his mind. He saw himself standing in a dark room, surrounded by cold, lifeless bodies. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't sad. He was the one who had ended them. Then another image. A laboratory. Machines hummed. Wires snaked across his skin. A voice, distant but sharp. Subject 6 to 17 is fully operational. Deploy him to the front lines. Joran gasped, stumbling back as reality came rushing in. He gripped his head, chest rising and falling like he couldn't get enough air. He looked at the stranger, eyes wild. What was that? The stranger studied him, unreadable. Then finally, you. Joran's hands curled into fists. No, he said, shaking his head. That wasn't me. But the truth was there, staring him in the face. The soldiers weren't chasing him because he was a man. They were chasing him because he was a weapon. And now he remembered why. No escape, no mercy. Heavy footsteps echoed at the alley's entrance. The soldiers had found them. The lead soldier stepped forward, weapon raised. Stand down, he commanded. Joran felt different, like something inside him had woken up. His heartbeat slowed. His breathing steadied. The panic, the fear, it was gone. His body knew what to do. The first soldier moved. Joran moved faster. His fist slammed into the man's helmet. A perfect, crushing strike. The soldier staggered, but Joran wasn't done. He twisted, kicking out with inhuman precision. The second soldier crumpled. Joran's muscles burned, but it wasn't pain. It was power. The stranger watched, nodding slightly. "Told you," he said. "You still have it." Joran wiped the blood from his knuckles. The remaining soldiers hesitated, recalculating their approach. They weren't just fighting Joran. They were fighting what he had been trained to be. Joran took a slow step forward, voice low, dangerous. "Your turn," he said. The soldiers raised their weapons. And the alley exploded into chaos. The truth unleashed. Joran didn't think. His body moved before his mind could catch up. The first soldier lunged, weapon raised. Joran sidestepped, faster than he should have been, his hands grabbing the soldier's wrist in one fluid motion. A sharp twist, a sickening snap, and the weapon fell to the ground. The soldier barely had time to react before Joran's fist crushed into his helmet. A single, brutal strike. The second came at him from behind. Joran ducked, his instincts sharper than ever, his body reacting like it already knew the attack was coming. A low kick. A sweep. The second soldier hit the ground hard. Joran exhaled, his breath steady, his heart slow. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't afraid. He was awake, and that scared him more than anything else. Behind him, the stranger chuckled. "Looks like you remember how to fight." Joran's hands trembled, not from fear, from control. His muscles burned with something old, something buried deep, an unnatural precision, a skill set designed for one purpose. And it wasn't survival. It was elimination. The final soldier backed away, weapon shaking in his hands. He pressed a button on his wrist. A sharp, metallic beep. Joran knew what that sound meant. Reinforcements. He lunged forward, grabbing the soldier's armor and slamming him into the wall. The impact cracked stone. Joran's voice was low, deadly. "Who sent you?" The soldier coughed. "You already know." Joran's grip tightened. He wanted to deny it, but the name was already forming in his mind. Project Revenant. The place he had run from. The people who had made him. And now, they wanted him back. Joran's fingers twitched, the urge to end this fight growing stronger. The stranger stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Let him go." Joran's jaw clenched. The old him, the weapon, would have finished the job. But Joran wasn't that man anymore. Was he? With a slow breath, he released his grip. The soldier crumpled to the ground, gasping. He wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. The stranger tilted his head. Interesting choice. Joran ignored him. "We need to leave. Now." The stranger nodded. Agreed. They sprinted through the city's dark alleys, disappearing into the neon-lit night. But deep inside, Joran knew he wasn't running from them anymore. He was running toward the truth, a stranger's mercy. The city pulsed with neon light, but Joran barely saw it. His breath was steady. His hands no longer shook. The fight had been over minutes ago, but inside him, something was still burning. He had moved too fast, hit too hard, reacted before he even knew what was happening. And worst of all, it had felt natural. The stranger walked beside him, silent, watching. He had said nothing since they left the alley, and that silence was heavier than words. Joran finally spoke, his voice low. "They trained me to be a weapon." The stranger nodded. "They did." Joran clenched his jaw. "And you knew." "I did." Joran exhaled, his fingers curling into fists. All this time, he had been running from something he couldn't even remember. And now, he knew the truth. He wasn't just an escaped fugitive. He wasn't just some lost soldier. He was something built, something designed. And the worst part, he was good at it. Joran stopped walking. The street buzzed with life around them. Speeders zipped through the air. People moved in blurred silhouettes. But none of it mattered. He turned to the stranger. "You said you were like me," Joran said, voice unreadable. "But you're not running." The stranger studied him. "No." Joran narrowed his eyes. "Why?" A faint smile. "Because I stopped pretending I could." Joran's chest tightened. The stranger sighed, tilting his head toward the sky. "You can run for years, for lifetimes, but you'll never outrun what you are." His gaze fell back to Joran. "You have to make a choice." Joran already knew what the choice was. Keep running. Keep hiding. Pretend he was something else. Or turn around. Face them. End it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the stranger tossed him something. Joran caught it instinctively. A small silver coin. The same symbol that had been burned into his skin. Joran turned it over in his fingers, feeling the cold weight of it. The stranger's voice was quiet. "That mark doesn't control you. You do." Joran exhaled. His grip tightened around the coin. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of the truth. He pocketed the coin and met the stranger's gaze. "I'm done running." The stranger smirked. "Good." A shadow passed overhead. Joran and the stranger both turned. A sleek, black drone hovered in the sky, scanning the street. Joran didn't flinch. "They're coming," the stranger said. Joran nodded. "Let them."